So today we'd like to welcome Shelley Callahan, who is the director of the Mohawk Valley Refugee Assistance Center for about a dozen years and has very successful programs with Heidelberg Bakery and Chobani and other companies, welcoming tens of thousands of refugees per year for many decades. I believe that's it. And she'll give you the details that are correct. But it's a really remarkable program that looks at the lifestyle, the language, and the ability to work, to get people to get refugees and immigrants actually to work and as a contributing part of the workforce. So without further ado, Shelley, I'm going to let you take over and you can sort of see the people and they can see you. Yes, they can see you. And then I'm going to disappear. Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak this morning. It's great to see all of you. So I'm Shelley Callahan. I'm the executive director of the center in Utica. We have been doing refugee resettlement for 40 years. This is our 40th anniversary. Actually, we were incorporated in 1981. In that time, we have resettled over 17 or just about 17,000 refugees into the city of Utica. So 17,000 refugees into the city of Utica over 40 years. And I think what's remarkable about that is Utica has, a population of about 60,000. We've also had thousands of secondary migrants come into Utica that have followed the refugee population that we've resettled, as well as other immigrants. So Utica is really a diverse, small city, and its diversity is really diverse. We've resettled folks from over 36 different countries and counting. So it's a great little diverse city. So I've been doing this since 2006. Just a little bit about how I kind of ended up here. I had been living in DC for about 10 years with my husband, had various jobs there, ended up working at the Supreme Court and resettled to the Utica area, and really had no experience with working with refugees or any sort of human services ever, really. And once my youngest child was old enough to go to school, I began to look for a job in the area, and I walked into the refugee center and immediately felt like I wanted to work there. I didn't care what I was doing. So I made my way into the director's office and talked my way into a job in the employment department. So that's where I started, reading employment contracts, working with employers, and getting refugees jobs. So that's just a little bit about how I happened into this business, really. And I've spent the last 15 or so years really just constantly educating myself about refugees across the globe, programs, really looking for best practices wherever they might be. And it's become a passion. So I do want to talk a little bit about the center as a whole. So we have the resettlement program, which is really the heart and soul of the center, but it is by no means all that we do. However, the last 4.5, 5 years have been extremely difficult to weather. And it has been that way for all resettlement sites across the US. The former administration, the prior presidential administration, really wanted to end the refugee resettlement program and spent the entire administration from their first day in office, where there were some executive orders signed banning refugees access to the country, to their last days. And they spent 4 years dismantling a program that had been working beautifully, really. It was this wonderful relationship, private partnership between the US government and basically faith-based organizations. So my center, I am an affiliate of Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, Catholic Charities, HIAS, a Jewish organization, Church World Service, many other faith-based organizations have been involved in refugee resettlement, even prior to 1980 when the Refugee Act was passed. So, it's been 4 years of decreased funding, refugees not being able to access entry into the country, and a dismantling of the program even overseas. So there's been thousands of people that have lost their jobs. And our numbers went from about 400 arrivals a year down to 200, then down to 100. And this past year we only had 58 arrivals. So it's been devastating to the program. It's been devastating to refugees. Many of our arrivals at this point are what we call family reunification. So they have some family here that has applied for them to travel to them. And so all that has been disrupted. And it's been a pretty crazy 4 years. Then on top of that, we've had this pandemic happen. And so that has just added another layer of difficulty. We have had to, over the last year and a half, like everybody else, learn to deliver services remotely, pick people up from the airport in masks, and then not be able to really provide case management to them in person. We've had to learn how to do things remotely, get people jobs, teach the people who are out there in jobs how to be safe when they go to work. You probably wouldn't be surprised to hear that many of the refugees who come here and get jobs were essential workers throughout this whole pandemic. So they were really on the front lines of our community. And there was unfortunately a pretty heavy toll on some of our refugee populations with regard to COVID and illness and death. So the last several years have been just really challenging in many, many ways. But like the folks who resettle, I think the resettlement industry has been extremely resilient and resourceful. And we now, in the past, 8 months, have just been growing at an incredible pace. Lots of new programs, just lots of workforce development funds, especially. And as you are probably aware, there is a critical workforce shortage all across New York State and basically the country as well. So there is renewed interest in bringing in refugees and other immigrants to sort of help shore up this workforce decline. But I'll get back to that in a few minutes. So I just want to give a little overview of some of the other programs. I'll get back to employment and who we work with. But just to give you kind of a sense of the breadth of what the agency does in Utica. So we are currently also resettling Afghans. So that's a whole new population. Their status, they're considered humanitarian parolees. It's a new population for us to work with. They're able to access all the same services as refugees, but their status is much less certain. So we'll see how this plays out. This is really a temporary protected status that they're being afforded. And right now it looks like that's going to last for 2 years. And so they're going to have to adjust their status either to legal permanent resident or asylum seeker or something. And all of that is a little unclear at the moment. But that's a new population that is coming in right now. And interestingly, what's kind of challenging about this is all the resettlement sites, just like I said, are in the midst of regrowing programs. We had been kind of bare bones staff as our arrival numbers were low. And so we were just starting to build back up to get heavy arrivals of refugees this year, and this Afghan crisis happened. So it has really been, it's been crazy. I feel like we're kind of building a plane while we're in midair with some of this, really trying to hire staff, get language and culturally appropriate things in place for a whole new population that is going to come in large numbers really rapidly. And so we're already doing that. We're already in the midst of doing that resettlement, but that's a new program that has just kind of hit the scene in Utica and across the country. We also have ESOL classes, so English as Second Language classes on site at the center. Those have just started to do in-person classes at the beginning of September. So very happy to have folks back in the center working and learning. We have an immigration and citizenship department that helps hundreds of folks adjust their status every year. So refugees are able to become legal permanent residents 1 year post-arrival and achieve citizenship at 5 years post-arrival. And we work with all other immigrants as well. So that office generally helps hundreds of folks adjust their status every year. We have an interpretation and translation office that works professionally, so very busy, working fee for service, works with lots and lots of employers. And we do cultural competency training for employers as well out of that department. And that's been critically important into our success with our employment department. We have the Welcome Center, which is a fairly new establishment, and it's partially funded by Chobani, one of our employers, who recognizes the worth of that these populations bring into our community. And that department is especially focused on entrepreneurship. So we're helping folks learn how to start their own businesses. We also house the Office for New Americans. That is a department that works on citizenship, training, ESL, and also employment concerns. And so those are just some of the offices. Oh, we also have traffic safety. That's a state grant. We help people get their driver's licenses. One of the biggest barriers to success in our community is transportation. Public transportation doesn't really work great in Utica, I would say, and many of our employers can be pretty far away. The shifts can be really challenging. So a lot of times a bus line might have transportation to a job, but they don't have it back. So lots of challenges to be worked out in terms of transportation in our area. So our traffic safety program is really, really busy. It's one of the first things we do when arrivals come. We have a driving simulator on site. We have made sure that the permit test is translated into many, many different languages. And we really try and get employment eligible folks driving as soon as they're safe and trained. And so that is a very, very busy program. And so to talk a little bit, because I know what I've heard is you guys are interested in our employment services, especially. So we have worked with local employers for 40 years, and we have decades-long relationships with many employers. Chobani, that relationship started actually when I started at the center back in 2006, 2007, 2008, somewhere in there. And what's really interesting about the way Chobani developed was when I started in resettlement work, this area had just seen a large influx of Bosnian refugees. And they were determined to be a good workforce. Everybody wanted Bosnians. And so when I came to the center, the Bosnian program had closed, and we were starting to see Burmese and Karen, Somali Bantu. And there was, some skepticism, I think, out in the community that these folks would be as good a fit, that they would be good workers, that they would be able to, lift up the community the way the Bosnians had. And the beautiful thing about Chobani and Hamdi, who I've met on several occasions, was he never doubted for a second that these folks would be just as capable and wonderful as any other folks. And so Chobani was immediately open to trying whatever we suggested to build success at their plant. And I'd say we have, over the years, put at least 200 people to work there, possibly more. I didn't look at the numbers, but it has been a long-standing relationship. Folks like to work there. We also have great relationships with Keymark, which is all the way out in Fonda, New York. Lots of local employers. And, when I first started, there were a couple large employers and maybe 6 to 10, and pretty much everybody could, find a job there, at least their first job. So ConMed was really big. Turning Stone Casino, always big. I mean, there were just a couple of large employers, and we were able to put most of our folks to work in one of these large employers that we knew very well. Well, over time, those large employers, a lot of them moved or changed or closed or just started to do business differently. And we find ourselves now with active relationships with probably 80 employers, I would say. So we are really kind of out there everywhere. Our employment department, as part of the resettlement process, meets with every incoming refugee between the age of 18 and 60, and does a short-term and long-term goal in terms of what they want in a career. And so from there, they match folks with different employers. And we have lots of kind of wraparound services in our employment department, mentorship, language, working on transportation situations. I think one of the most time-consuming things for my employment department is transportation, setting up carpools, seeing if the bus situation is going to work, and then how to train people to use it. And it's getting trickier, and it's just interesting, especially in these times, because the cost of housing has gone up just an insane level in the past year. So we're struggling with that. And we're also finding that the cost of used cars has just skyrocketed. So a lot of immigrant and refugee populations, they come in, they pool their funds, and they hope to buy a used car. And one, they're getting scarce, and two, the price has just kind of gone through the roof. So there's always challenges, kind of unforeseen, when you work in refugee resettlement, I think. And so it's just kind of, you can make really great plans, and the world just has a way of, messing with you every now and again. But our employment department does between 300 and 400 job placements a year, regardless of how many arrivals we get. We help people get promotions. We help people change their jobs. And one of the reasons that the employers that we work with kind of like what we do is, if I've placed someone at your job site, let's say in an entry-level position, and that person is now ready to either move up at your company or move up into another job somewhere, we make sure that we have folks in line to sort of fill the position that's being vacated. So we really do, as much as we take care of our refugee and immigrant clientele, we really do form relationships with employers and really try to serve them as best we can as well. Because those relationships, as I said, are often many, many years long, and we've come to rely on each other in certain ways. I will say that this workforce shortage has been quite something. We might get a job order from a single company for 75 job openings. When I started back in 2006, if I got 7 people a job in a month, that was wow. I mean, there just weren't any jobs available. It was just much, much harder back then. And now we can't keep up. Employers are begging for workforce. And we have, I think, about 6 job openings at the center, just because we're growing and it takes time to find workforce at this point. So the challenges that we are seeing in employment right now are a little bit different than what we have seen historically. So a little bit about the folks that do the work. My employment department is entirely former refugees. So they have language and cultural expertise. They're able to share that with the employers that we work with, and obviously the clients that they're working with. We can send folks in to shadow someone at a new job. We provide lots of interpretation, lots of translation, which is written material, and cultural competency training. And so we have a professional trainer, and we have different levels of cultural competency training. But it's really to go in and talk to employers about who we are, who the folks are that we're resettling, but really more than anything, it helps people examine their own filters. So I think it's, we have trainings that last from 1 hour to 2 days. We like them to be interactive. We also do consulting. So there are some employers that we have worked with closely to put together strategies that are going to work for them. So we work with a company called Keymark, for instance. They do aluminum extrusion. And frankly, I'm still not sure what that is, aluminum extrusion. But I have gone there and helped folks, helped supervisors, helped plant managers figure out how to put a line of entirely Burmese Karen workers together so that they can carpool. And also with 1 or 2 folks in the group that can speak enough English to interpret for the rest of the folks in that pod. And over time, what we have heard is that the refugee workers, that line outperforms all the others by quite a bit on a regular basis. So employers really do appreciate this workforce once they take the time to set up a situation where the workers can be successful. So there is quite a bit of work, I think, that goes into the front end of it. And we never stop working with folks. So Chobani's been doing this for, well over a decade. And we are still working closely with them, putting together some training components right now to help folks that are there improve their English and also prepare for promotion to make sure that they're able to move up if that's what they want to do. So I think those situations where our relationship with employers is strong, we tend to see the most success. And those employers will just have people walk in, immigrants as well as refugees and others, and ask to work at those places. They've heard good things. Word of mouth really does matter in these communities. And so if they feel supported by an employer, that's kind of where we'll see the most interest. And that is incredibly important right now, where I think there are so many choices for people to work and so many employers desperate for workforce. There are struggles, when you have a large part of your workforce dependent on things like carpools, and let's say the carpool driver has a dental appointment or falls ill, or what, you have to have lots of contingency plans, lots of, kind of redundancies, I guess. And a lot of times the early morning in Utica in the employment department can be the busiest because they're fielding calls about somebody's transportation fell through or a carpool isn't working out. And a lot of times we really hit the pavement in those situations and help people figure out how to get everybody to work. So that's just kind of an overview of what we do. I'm really interested in taking questions, if there's any questions, or if there are services you want me to talk more about. We're expecting 300 refugees this fiscal year, which started October 1st, which is a huge improvement from the 58 that we just had. And we're expecting an additional 75 Afghan evacuees as part of our caseload this year. And we are already resettling both. Our caseload for refugees this year is still Burmese and Karen, with quite a few Congolese and Sudanese and folks from the former Soviet Union. So, and of course, there's always some other folks that come in, but that is kind of in a nutshell the caseload that we're expecting and working with. We have probably 13 languages spoken on staff. Many of the staff at the center are former refugee, and that just has always seemed to work really well. The Afghan evacuees, I'm so sorry about this clock. It's gonna ding, I think, 12 times. So wait for that. So final word about the Afghan population we're seeing, highly capable, had good lives, good jobs, worked for the US military or probably a lot of times US companies over there. So there's usually at least one person who speaks English in the family. And you know, they share our values in many ways, which is part of the reason they had to flee. But they are, you know, highly traumatized. Stories of folks literally running for their lives. Some of their family didn't get to the airport. So you have lots of separated families and all the anxiety and trauma that goes with that. And, you know, it's a little different than the folks that we typically see at a resettlement center, which is folks that have been languishing in refugee camps, sometimes for a decade or more. So a lot to manage this year as we go forward. And we hear that the Afghan evacuee program is going to last for, it's been funded for a year. So we'll see what happens after that. But that's kind of where we are in Utica right now. And I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has about any of our services. Yeah.
That's better. Okay.
I can hear something.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, good. This is a different platform than I'm in. I need some cultural training on this one. But the question has to do with resettlement and housing. So how do you work on housing, furniture? Who are your partners? Are the churches, nonprofits? How does that all how do you put that all together?
So for resettlement, we receive about $1,250 per arriving refugee. So it's per capita. And we spend that on their behalf before they arrive. So with that, we pay the rent for an apartment. We buy all the furnishings, and we try to put about 2 weeks worth of groceries in the apartment before they get there. And the way that it works is if a single case comes, we lose money. There's no way to do all that for $1,250, and rent has gone up to just, it's been crazy what's gone on with rent. But if we have a family of, let's say 3, 4, 5, 6, we are able to pool that $1,250 per arriving person and provide those services, find a place for them to live, furnish it, you know, and we are contractually obligated, I mean, down to the last knife, fork, and spoon and toothbrush. We have to, you know, keep a very detailed kind of invoice and receipt of everything we've spent money on, diapers if they have babies, things like that. And so if there's any money left when we close the case, the resettlement portion of the case at about the 90-day mark, we give them any remaining cash. And that's considered sort of the resettlement services. We also have to do home visits and, you know, help them start their life in terms of enrolling in school, refugee health assessments, help them find a primary caregiver, help them access public benefits if they qualify, and almost all of them do, and refer them to the employment department. So it's a really busy resettlement time. And finding affordable housing has frankly become almost impossible. So I'm constantly fundraising to fill the gap. We used to be able to get housing for, let's say, a 3-person family between 7. About $750 is what it would cost us. It is now well over $1,000, and that happened, you know, in less than a year. So it's a struggle, and a lot of landlords ask for first and last month's rent and a security deposit. So we do have long-standing relationships with many, many landlords in Utica, but it has become just so much more challenging recently. So we're going to see how this year goes.
And this is an aside. As people are downsizing and moving to smaller, are you allowed to use their extra furniture that they could provide, or does it have to be new furniture that you provide?
So it doesn't have to be new, but part of the issue with with youth stuff is just resources in terms of staffing. So it's, we have had relationships with furniture stores, and the building that we're currently in has a lot of storage space and a conveyor belt and a loading dock. So we have been able to buy things in bulk and save folks money that way. And we do really like people to get good quality, especially beds and things like that. And so there are things that we're really not terribly comfortable taking used, like beds or mattresses, things like that, because there have been bed bug issues. There have been even cockroaches coming out of TVs and things like that. But we are this is kind of a new situation for us. So we really are going to start looking at working more with the community, with churches, setting up what we call sponsorship arrangements, where either an individual or an organization can sponsor a family. And we really try and make that arrangement last for a year. So it's not just about stuff. I mean, stuff is good, but also just relationship to kind of help the family know that they have folks that they can count on if they have questions or maybe need a ride somewhere, things like that. So resettlement for us is starting to change. We are going to start, I think, relying more heavily on the community in ways that we really haven't in the past. So yeah, and it's going to take, we are building a much bigger volunteer base, and currently looking for a volunteer coordinator. So once I get that in place, I think that we're going to start to see more used furniture. And if a case comes here and they have what we call a US tie, so there's somebody here that knows them, we work really closely with them. And we presume, or we actually know that they're talking to the family. So they let us know, hey, we've got beds for this family. Hey, we've got this for the family. So don't spend their money on that. Spend their money on this. So when it's a US tie case, which is most of our cases, I feel like we're pretty well informed on what the family wants and needs. But when it's a free case, so a case that's coming with no ties here, it's a little bit more of you don't know so much until they actually get here. So, I hope that answers the question.
It doesn't. It leads into Sue's second half of the question, I think, which is skills and developing skills through community colleges. And what was your?
I mean,
you tell me again.
Is there anything happening with getting refugees to community colleges?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so you can get them. Yeah, you can put them onto a skill training path or an education path.
Yeah. So we have a very, very close working relationship with Mohawk Valley Community College, and so our ESOL classes. A couple of the instructors are actually MV instructors, so it's their program at our site. And we also have lots of connection in terms of training. So exactly what you're talking about. We have had things that we've done through MV and the Department of Labor, where we've had folks be able to get their OSHA certificates. And we've actually had the instructors come in and they taught the class in maybe Russian or Karen or some other language to sort of get people up and really understanding safety things, because you don't want to presume that somebody understands kind of safety things. And so we're always happy to teach folks in their own languages when we can, so that when they go out, they really, especially around things like safety. And we just got several new grants that are focused on career pathways. So, and what those look like for us is community colleges, high schools, and employers all coming to the table and figuring out where the opportunities are, what training should be put in place to make people, to make the pathway work. And then our part in that is making sure that our folks have access to those pathways. So we're making sure that there's interpretation if needed, translation, or, targeted ESL classes. So helping people, really understand terms of art in whatever industry they're interested in going in. And we have, I think, 3 new programs kind of building off that this year.
Great. Terrific. I think we have a question. Yes?
How are they funded?
Okay. How are you funded? Is a question.
So the Refugee Resettlement Program is funded from the U.S. State Department, the Office of Refugee Resettlement. So when I talked about that $1,250 that comes to the refugee, we get about $1,100 that goes to the agency to pay us to provide those services. And then there are lots of state contracts around employment. We have private foundation dollars for some things. I mentioned Chobani had funded a portion of our Welcome Center. And we have, grants from the Office of Mental Health. We actually hold a CDC grant right now. We're doing COVID information. We've done tons of community outreach translation. We have vaccination clinics on site. And so next week, for instance, we'll be doing COVID vaccination and flu shots on Thursday from 2 to 4. So we do lots of programs. One of the unique things about our center is it's called a one-stop shop. And I think that's really probably why it's a model in many cases for the rest of the country. So we have resettlement happening there, which has very specific services that have a beginning and an end date. But we have all these other programs, the employment department, traffic safety, where we give out car seats to families who need them for their children, and we provide education around that. We have mental health services. We have immigration and citizenship. So all these services are on site. And literally anybody can walk in at this point, and now that we're back open, and we don't turn anyone away. So, and that's great, because a lot of resettlement sites, if they only have resettlement, they don't have funding past 90 or maybe 180 days to provide resettlement services. And then those folks are just kind of out and on their own. So one of the unique things about our site is that we have services that keep going, and we really like to build relationship with our community and have them come, just have them, be with us for as long as they want to be.
Another question? Sally?
What do they do about health insurance, or if they have some big health issue?
Yeah.
How do they pay for it, or are you responsible, or do you have?
Yeah, so refugees can access public assistance when they get here. We help them do that. And so most of them qualify for Medicaid. And so that's their first insurance. But they also they're also very, very anxious to get jobs. So they might be on public assistance for, say, 3 to 6 months while they look for a job. One of the things that folks come in, we have to get them a Social Security card, a Social Security number. That takes about 45 days. So really no one's going to hire anyone without a Social Security number. And there's also a ton of appointments that they have to do within the first 30 days. So they're really busy in the resettlement process. When they first arrive, it's just appointments and medical appointments and, things with their kids. It's just a very busy, probably stressful time for new arrivals. And so we get all that done, and then we work on finding them a job. And in the interim, they go to our English as second language classes on site. So we're really, we like to keep hands on folks, especially when they're newly arrived, because there's a lot of, it's just good to keep talking to people through that. We're able to make sure that, are you sleeping? Are you eating? Have you found a market that has, the food that you said you really missed when you arrived? Because, a lot of times it's just such a stressful process, I think, resettlement. And I think people don't like to think about that too much. They want to just think that people get here and they jump into that job and they put their kids in school and it's, it's great. Everybody's grateful and learning English. And the truth is that's happening, but it's really stressful. So what we try to do at the center is provide the tools to be successful, but to also provide a soft landing where people can catch their breath a little bit, where they feel supported and welcomed, and where they know that no question is off the table. And so I missed being at the office so much throughout COVID, and I've really started to appreciate. I'm hearing, broken English in the hallways again as a Sudanese refugee is asking a Karen refugee a question about, what market they go to. And it's just, the center, I think, is a little bit of, for me, magic. I've had lots of different jobs. I've worked lots of different places. I love it there, but I think people sometimes forget just how hard it is to get on a plane, fly literally halfway around the world, and just trust that it's going to work there. So folks are highly motivated, but also highly stressed.
John, go ahead. You got a projection.
Has Utica seen the development of refugee groups based on language or nation, sort of local groups that could also then be helpful when new refugees come in? Is it that developed?
Can you repeat that a little louder?
Are there community groups based on the refugee communities? For example, Bosnian community, Karen community, in the future Afghan, that could be helpful in absorbing the new refugees coming in?
Yeah, so just last week, the Bosnian American Community Association brought in a big donation of toys for arriving kids, backpacks, school supplies, which was fantastic. And also just really offered to be present to help in any way that they could, newly arrived refugees that are coming in, which was wonderful. And it was really great because some of the people that dropped the donation off had been resettled through the center, and they remembered receiving donations from other groups of refugees that had come before them. There's the Somali Bantu Association, the Sudanese have a community, and we, when we know folks are coming in from those countries, we reach out to community-based organizations routinely. And also faith-based organizations. So one of the things that Refugee Resettlement has done in Utica is really revitalized lots of faith communities. There was a church in the middle of Utica that beautiful Baptist church was down to 75 congregants. It's now with the Karen up to about 1,000. And it has a service in English and in Karen and Burmese. And it is just vibrant, thriving. They are great partners and enormous supporters. There are about, I think, 4 mosques now. A new one is being built. One's right next to City Hall. That had been a church, a Methodist church. They're all extremely supportive. And lots of churches we've seen increase in, congregations due to refugees tend to come here, and many of them have very strong faith traditions. So we work with lots of community-based organizations and faith-based organizations.
More questions? Anyone else have a question here? It's here. Well, I have a question based on the film. It has to do with soccer. I understand that that's been soccer teams have been a way to gather people together from different countries.
Yeah. So
how do you promote soccer among the refugees? Do you have a league?
We don't have a league, but there are many leagues, and we make sure that we help folks access them as they want to. There is a soccer tournament in Utica called the Redeemer Cup that happens every other year, and it was actually started by Redeemer Church. It usually has about 16 teams. It looks like a mini World Cup. It is a fantastic time. And, I would say that refugees came in and really transformed Utica in terms of soccer. So in parks that really just had a softball or a baseball field and then lots of open field, we have seen lots of soccer fields turn up, lots more enthusiasm for soccer, and it's been pretty great. So we work closely with our ASO organization to make sure that there's opportunities, for kids who maybe don't speak English or don't have rides. My daughter was actually in soccer, and we made sure that she played, that we brought in some refugee kids into her league, which I have to say really increased the skill level of our team like 1,000%. They know soccer in a way that is just, it's incredible. So I am a huge soccer fan. I love having all this new enthusiasm for soccer. So it's been huge. And if you go to Redeemer Cup every year, or every other year, the mayor's there. Lots of folks are there because it is just such a good time. So, and I would say one of the things about refugee resettlement and any town you're doing, you really have to think about the receiving community. And I think our organization has always been really mindful of that. So we work closely with the mayor's office, the county executive's office, the fire department, the police department. We've had the fire department call us on many occasions if they see something that's a little troubling. A lot of times there'll be tapestries hung all over apartments and candles and things like that they'll start to see that aren't safe. They might see folks using a grill, a charcoal burning grill on the stove, or trying to heat their apartment with fire in the winter. And so they'll call us and we'll do cultural training for those folks. And we've also done cultural competency training for the fire and the police department. So to do refugee resettlement, you really have to look at both sides, the incoming population and the receiving community.
So anyone else have a question? I want another. Okay. What about the young people who are not old enough to work in the family? They go to the schools, and how does that work in terms of school placement?
So the schools do their own placement tests. And I think in New York, I think folks kind of go into whatever class is age appropriate. Utica has a refugee school impact grant. So they have academic coaches that are culturally and linguistically appropriate for most of the populations we resettle. It is really challenging for older kids to come in to the school at, let's say 15, 16, 17, if they've never had formal education and they speak no English to be successful. That is a challenge everywhere across the country. And I think we have to find a way to do a little bit better by those folks. But younger kids come in and they pick up the language so quickly. It's really, if you come as a younger person, they typically are the ones who learn English the fastest in the family, and they might end up being sort of a broker for their parents in lots of ways. We do have Making a Connection program at the center that works specifically with 15 to 24-year-olds. So we try and help folks either access vocational training, help them get through high school, determine if they want to go to college, maybe community college, or if they want to get a job. Really try and help folks through that kind of difficult, those challenging years.
Any other questions? Are we good? We're almost ready to go. We have time for one or two more questions. Anyone? One thing that you might find interesting is the Greater Good Grocery, which started in Utica. We had a section of Binghamton that was a food desert, had not had a grocery store for 25 years. And as the community looked to fill that need, they found the Greater Good Grocery in Utica. And now we have, if you will, what do you call it? An extension.
Awesome.
A clone. Right, and it's actually run out of Utica basically, and we cloned it here, and it's working very well. So that suggests that might. So first of all, thanks to the people at the Great Good Grocery, but second, it suggests there might be some other kind of learning experiences where Binghamton could benefit from Utica's really positive experience, and we might have to figure out a way. Yeah.
I would just leave you with, we are looking to expand in terms of resettlement sites. The whole system is looking to identify more sites that would be suitable for resettlement. So just keep that in mind. And they really are thinking that small cities work really well. So, yeah.
Sue, go ahead. Yeah.
This is
Louder.
crazy to mention to you because I can imagine your schedule, but next week we have our American Civic Association, who is the group here in Binghamton. And if there's any chance you could get on and listen to her next week, maybe we would begin to examine. Start. Yeah.
The American Civic Association in Binghamton started actually in 1919 because of the Endicott Johnson Shoe Company, but evolved from there. The director of that is speaking in this series next Sunday, and you're welcome to participate, or with the permission of the speaker, then we offer this as a recording on our YouTube channel, so that if next Sunday doesn't work for you, then you could see it and record it. We should also ask you if we could put this wonderful presentation on our YouTube channel. So.
Yeah, you absolutely share it. And we used to work with the American Civil Liberties Union in Binghamton when they did resettlement. They had a small program for a number of years, and it closed some years ago. They stopped doing refugee resettlement. So I'd be happy if I have the time. I haven't looked at my schedule, but I'm very interested in what they're doing.
Thank you very much. That'd be wonderful. And I think there are some members of that staff as part of the congregation who are not here today. So we can help you see what connections might be possible. So.
Great.
And then I think there's several people, or well, not quite in when we started, but several are faculty members who teach foreign languages and might be able to speak to the ability of people in the Broome County community for providing translation services for some of these very diverse languages. I don't know, John? No, no. Okay.
I'm thinking.
Go ahead. Come up.
There is a local church who is very active with the Afghanistan program. Their main job right now is it costs $565 per person, no matter what age, to just fill out the paperwork. So that church is gathering a lot of people in and help them with paperwork. Then the next thing is there are people in their country that are saying, I would love to house someone, but the restrictions, and I don't know from where, are so great that it becomes a difficult problem. They have to have kitchen facility, bathroom facility, separate entrance in their home in order to have one of these families be able to come and live with them. Do you run into that?
I haven't really run into that. We have resettled, I think, about 10, or well, actually by today, 14 folks so far. We're going to resettle up to 75, and I haven't heard that, but I'm happy to look into it to see what you're talking about. We've been using Airbnbs, and we do have, my agency we own some buildings. We do temporary housing in, or we've leased buildings. So we haven't run into that problem, but housing is just going to get more and more difficult, and I think critically important. So I don't like to hear about those barriers. That to me doesn't seem to be, it's not helpful.
Well, I think we're out of time. Is there anyone who has any questions or any thoughts or any final comments? Are we good? But we want to thank you again it's really been inspiring. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. Have a nice day.
Okay. Great.